Welcome back to the Freemouse MC, and we are today here with the Honda CBR 600F. And now you ask me, haven't you reviewed this motorcycle just like 3 weeks ago? No, this is the model from 1987, and it's a very special motorcycle because this has been the first fully faired 600cc motorcycle with a liquid-cooled engine and a 6-gear transmission, and kind of the first of its kind. And that engine has 598 cc, producing 86 horsepower and 59 newton meters of torque. And all this in this relatively small package, because as you see here, this bike standing in front of me is not the biggest. And it seems a bit bigger because it has a center stand, which I really appreciate and think is very cool for doing your own chain maintenance. A lot of these bikes that are competitors with this machine don't have a center stand. And on top of that, these motorcycles can be had for less than $1,000, and for that you get adjustable suspension. The suspension is adjustable with filling air into the front suspension. You have 130 millimeters in the front and 110 in the rear. And what an incredible package of a motorcycle. This motorcycle has been very kindly provided by Niels. Welcome to the channel. Really nice to have you here. And how much have you paid for this amazing machine, and why have you bought it?
So I paid 800 euros for this bike, and I bought it spontaneously. I had some money saved and I browsed the internet for bikes on mobile.de, and I found the announce of this bike. And it just spoke to me. I called up the owner, he said it was still available. So I went down to the Harz Mountains, talked to him and bought it. But I had to invest quite a bit into the bike later on to make it really as good as it is right now.
That's really nice to hear that you got this bike for so cheap, but I'm curious how it was to invest all the money. We will hear about that later. First of all, you're quite a tall person like myself, but you still own this like relatively small machine. For context, this is how I sit on this machine. The motorcycle is 78 centimeters and a half tall from its seat height, and it fits quite nicely. It fits more like a naked bike than a Supersport would, which most likely makes it a bit more comfortable. We will see that how that is on the road. The only complaint that could be there is potentially burning your shoe on the exhaust, but that could also be due to aftermarket foot pegs. So let's see how the bike handles on the road. Let's go. So one thing that's more or less instantly apparent on this machine is how comfortable the machine actually is. It is a very small motorbike, very much too small for myself, but it ends up like being actually very upright and comfortable even with the clip-ons. And for like 600cc Supersport, you can very comfortably wear a backpack on this and just be completely fine. Usually you very quickly get like back pain and everything. So let's go. The bike has an incredible sound above 6,000 RPM, which is very nice. And the handling with the 130 rear tire is just amazing. The motorcycle has 130 rear tire, 110 in the front. And it makes for a very great handling, as it doesn't require that much lean angle to get the bike onto its side. And of course also many beginner riders who want a really cheap bike are looking online and then want the widest tire they can get, because wider tire equals to many beginner rider more safe, even though that's bullshit. But that means that all the beginners who don't really know how to take care of a motorcycle kind of stay away from these. So when I looked online, you had like a few very decent examples. Well, what means very decent examples? Carburetors clean and running. No roadworthiness inspection, but running. For $390, and like one for 500, and then up to 800 and 1,000 basically. That's where those bikes lay. but all of them were in relatively good condition from what the photos were saying. And the motorcycle is just so fun on the side of the tire. And this sound, wow! The bike shifts very smoothly up and down. Like, you don't have any problems with like shifting down, letting the clutch come in, and it just feels too rough. No, it all feels smooth and nice. Wind protection is sadly not really a thing on this bike. It has a full fairing. I mean, the bike could not be more fully faired. Everything is faired. You cannot really get to anywhere. You have to take like all the fairings off if you want to do anything on this bike. But the gain in wind resistance is not existent. But the bike feels so nice and fun, and also the bike only weighs 185 kilos dry and around 203 kilos wet, which is really impressive. And the bike is right perfect when it comes to its power. The 87 horsepower are so nicely to control, and it's just perfect because you get to have a lot of fun on the street without instantly going to jail. It's just a very fun little bike, I have to say. And the sound is very, very good, because the sound is basically all engine and airbox from underneath you, so it feels very natural compared to a sound that's mostly exhaust. And pretty much this machine feels like a modern motorcycle. You would not say that it's from 1987. The only point where it's kind of dodgy is here, as you see. Let's brake until this line. Yeah, it does it, but it feels very 1987 in that regard. But apart from that, it's a really decent machine. Also, one thing I really like are the instruments on the bike, and also the instruments with the little lights. Feels are very nice, looks good. Also, one thing this bike is from its gearing, relatively quick. This bike definitely walks all over other bikes with the same amount of power above 100 kilometers an hour, because really often with bikes in this power range, they then start to kind of get a bit slow above 140, and this thing just keeps going, basically, and that's really nice. And the 230 are not really doable that the bike has as a VMAX in sixth gear. A smaller rider would be needed for that, because I just don't have the aerodynamic. Niels, the owner of this machine over there on his VFR, also does not have the ergonomics for this machine, and then the wind resistance just gets too big, basically. One more thing, this motorcycle has been sold in the US under a different name, under the name Honda CBR 600F Hurricane. And Hurricane is really fitting, also with the exhaust sound and everything. Also, something that's really incredible about this machine, this bike does not feel old in the slightest. If I now would not be able to see what I'm sitting on, I would say that this bike is relatively modern, maybe 2008. But like, it just drives so smooth and nice, and yeah, it drives smooth and nice. The only issue that you kind of have is that the brakes can feel a bit old, but they still do their job well, and that the throttle feels very on-off sometimes. But yeah, I also feel like this machine gets especially interesting then on the used market, because the other bikes like the Yamaha FCR 600, yes, it has a beautiful dual headlight, but it shares a transmission with a 400cc Yamaha, and this bike basically has a transmission made for it, and with that it has very little points where something can go wrong. But we will get into more of that later together in an interview with Niels. So let's go. So I'm now back from taking the Honda CBR 600F for a spin, and what an incredible bike, I have to say. But earlier you mentioned that you had a bit of some issues when getting the bike and getting the bike on the road and actually having to go to the mechanic.
Well, yes, I had. When I bought it, the clutch had to be replaced, and the carburetors, they were gunked up, so they had to be cleaned. I took them to a shop here where I live, nearby, and they cleaned the carbs. Well, they told me that they cleaned the carbs. They exchanged the clutch, they changed the tires and the brakes. That was fine, but the bike was still not running well. So I went to Braunschweig to the Honda dealer Popco and told them they should look at the carbs again.
Yeah.
They told me they were not cleaned at all.
That is actually such typical shit for anyone watching. Really look good to where you bring your motorcycle, because many mechanics just say they have done something and then they have not done it. I had this exact same issue myself. I had this multiple times of multiple places. So yeah, I feel your pain on that one.
When I took the bike home, or when they called me that I can take the bike home, I picked it up, started it up, it ran well, but still not fine. So I said, well, maybe it's the age of the bike, and I started to drive it, and I sensed that something was off. The engine died on one cylinder when I opened the throttle, and the coolant temperature went higher and higher and higher and higher. So I spun around and rode back to the shop, told them about it, and they told me, well, yeah, our fault, we will fix this. In the end, in one of the carbs, one of the jets was not tightened enough, so it fell down, and the coolant was not full, which blew the head gasket of the bike on this tiny ride that I took.
Oh shit, that's not good whatsoever. But the second shop took it back, right? The first one was the one that didn't really do their work, and the second one, then they took it back, which is really nice of them.
Yes, it was. So Popco in Braunschweig, they took it back in. They gave me a bike to ride for 6 months.
For 6 months? That's crazy.
For 6 months, it took 6 months. I was wondering why it took so long. In the end, they took out the whole engine. They tore it apart. They took off the cylinder head. They milled the block and the head clean, flat. Replaced all the gaskets on the bike. Took in new jets in the carbs to make it run really clean.
Okay.
Ultrasonic clean of the carbs, everything. And they gave it back to me. They also did the TÜV inspection, and all for free. They told me it's our fault, not your issue. So I was happy as I can be, and they invested work and parts for around about 4,000 euros in this bike, which I couldn't grasp it when they gave it back to me. I was so happy, and now it runs like clockwork. You see in the driving videos, the timing chain tensioner still has a bit of issue, but this is something with the bike, with the model.
That's in general good that we bring that up. The bike runs really, really fine, and like you said, those were you had carburetor issues and brake issues, and those issues basically became bigger and bigger issues. Those are kind of the issues that you can expect. You could do these things yourself, or really find a place that you can trust, like the what was the name of the place? Popco in Braunschweig. So because they basically owned up to their mistake, and now the bike stands there really well. It's a very nice bike. The bike has a few weaknesses. One of them is the timing chain tensioner. That is a typical Honda issue that they have on a few of their bikes, but apart from that, this bike is completely basically bulletproof, and that's also really nice to know compared to the competition, where often stuff like transmissions are shared with smaller cc models. So if you're looking for a used 600 from this period, this is a really good bike to go for. And apart from that, it's basically perfect. And one big one that's actually kind of small, but it builds up over time, is that the side stand is with a little spring. As a result, it always folds in automatically. Sounds now nice in theory, is not that nice when you constantly have to press it down, and it gets complicated when putting the bike onto the side stand. It's just something in the daily usability, this could be a bit annoying. But all in all, what an amazing machine. Really loved it. Thank you for the opportunity to let me ride it. And if you guys like this type of content, definitely feel free to like and subscribe, and see you guys in the next video.